Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Today, we have another set of stories about getting back at someone with pro-revenge after being wronged. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so if you're new here, you don't miss a new video every single day. And our first story today, don't fire me so you can hire your nephew. This happened several years ago. I was working for a small medical supply company as the IT manager. Business was bad, and eventually the IT department had to downsize to just me. During this time, they brought in a new CFO that I had to report directly to. Let's call her Pam. Pam had zero knowledge of IT and how things worked. Her motto was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. PC, server life cycles didn't exist. We don't have to pay for licensing to keep our firewall updated. It's working just fine now. I went from having an annual budget to a wish list, which she would deny everything I asked for. The couple that owned the company were real pieces of crap, too. One time we had a quarterly meeting and people were asking how secure their jobs were. The owner said that nobody was getting laid off and that our jobs were all secure. This was at 5 o'clock on a Wednesday. The very next morning at 9 o'clock, they laid off 6 people. At noon, one of the owners showed up to show off the Escalade that he had just purchased that morning. During the first 6 months that Pam was there, she started firing everyone that worked for the old CFO and replaced them with their friends and family. 3 of her bridesmaids from her wedding a few years ago got hired to replace those that she fired. I knew I was on borrowed time. After she'd been there for 9 months, I was the only one left out of what was about a dozen people that worked for the old CFO. I knew my time was running out. I'd been looking for work, but the 2009 crash had just happened and the job market in my area went south quickly. Sure enough, she called me into HR and blindsided me with an entirely trumped-up charge that she claimed happened the day before. I was working with the VP of sales on a project that entire day, so I had a witness. I asked to bring him in since my boss was lying and was told, this is not about him, this is about you. Remember, kids, HR is there to protect the business, not do what is right or legal in some cases. Needless to say, I knew my days were numbered. The next morning, I get introduced to an IT expert who just happens to be Pam's 21-year-old nephew. He was to shadow me and evaluate everything that I did to see if we could streamline any processes. In other words, they wanted me to train him to do my job. I quickly learned that this kid had absolutely no knowledge of IT. He's the kid people think is an IT expert because he can hook up a PlayStation to a TV. He didn't even know how to join a PC to a domain. So I knew what had to be done. The inventory, billing, and shipping and receiving were all run by scripts that I'd created on the server. They were all run using the domain admin account. I raised quite a fuss about giving him the domain admin account in front of Pam and him. I then loudly proclaimed I was going to change the password to it since you can't have people who don't work for the company having admin access to our network. I was overruled and was told to give it to him. I complied, but also showed him multiple times how to change passwords on the domain. I even had him write down to make sure that he could do it. I really stressed the importance of changing the admin password and deleting his local account the second he's no longer consulting with us. I showed him a few things, but nothing in regards to what really made the company run that day. There wasn't enough time in a year to bring this kid up to speed on how to run the place due to his complete ignorance of IT. So I come into work the next day, and sure enough, I was let go because her nephew had found my skills lacking in many areas. I collect my last paycheck and head home. Next morning, I get a call from the CFO and owners. Apparently, her nephew wasn't quite up to speed on everything we did there, and she was graciously offering to pay me my regular salary to come in as a consultant to get her nephew up to speed on the IT infrastructure. I told her that I was now an independent contractor, and if she wanted my services, I was going to charge her $200 per hour with a 250-hour minimum. At that point, she told me she was going to call the police and have me arrested for what I did if I didn't come in and fix everything. My response was, just so we're clear, you fired me, replaced me with a completely unqualified idiot, and now you're threatening to call the cops on me if I don't come in and fix what he did? I'll hold. Please call the police and let me know what they say. She started cursing at me and hung up the phone. Turns out her nephew did actually learn something from me. He changed the admin password after I'd left, the one that ran all the scripts for inventory, billing, shipping, and ordering. According to some of my coworkers, the place was dead in the water for several days until they could get a real consultant in to go through the documentation that I had created and fix the issue. The nephew was immediately fired, and Pam was gone within a month. And our next story. My supervisor got fired to save his job. I ruined his life forever. This was like 10 years ago. I worked at a place with my friend. He got me the job. Our supervisor was this short little D-bag. His cousin was all of our bosses. Well, my supervisor wasn't very good, but our department was small, just me, my friend, and Captain D Nozzle. Word got around that his cousin was unsatisfied with his job performance, and she was ready to fire his butt. That's where this D-bag got petty. I worked in Florida. Florida is a right-to-work state. Basically, an employee can fire you just for fun if they want to, especially if you're on your 90-day probation. I was literally on day 89 of 90. This mother effer fires me. He knew full well that his cousin wasn't going to immediately fire him and leave the department with just one employee working by himself. His reason for firing me? It's just not working out. I told him that's bullcrap, and this isn't a relationship. I wanted a real reason for being fired. He wouldn't give me one, so whatever, I got fired. End of story, right? Wrong. I knew he was sleeping with a woman in the main office, a woman who'd had a hysterectomy. Why'd she have a hysterectomy? Oh, just because she had HPV. This effing D had a wife and 2 kids, and he was effing a chick with HPV. According to him, it was cool because guys can't get HPV. I told him guys could get it and pass it on to others, we just don't show symptoms. Anyway, I still had him on my MySpace as a friend. I'm telling you, this was 10 years ago. I did a little snooping and found his wife's MySpace page, sent her a beautifully written letter explaining how her husband was a D and he was effing another woman at work, and that she should probably get checked for HPV. I knew she would be like, WTF is this? Show him. And he would simply say I was a disgruntled ex-employee trying to F his family life up. I explained that scenario out to her and pled with her that even if she thought I was full of crap, that she deserved to get tested and make sure she wasn't infected. I never heard from her or Captain D-Bag again. Fast forward a few months into the future, my friend said he got fired. He was going to get fired anyway. Firing me just bought him a couple months' time. Fast forward a few years after that, my friend said he ran into him. His wife had left him, took the kids, and moved out of state. He doesn't see the kids. He lives in a crappy studio apartment. My friend told me he seemed miserable, and this made me so happy. Seemed his wife got the message and most likely got tested. Good for her. Absolute psycho almost ruined my dream job, but I subtly mind-effed her. This was years ago. I was in the 3rd year of my 2nd degree studying stage design, which required making scale sets, etc. And as I've always had a massive love of model cars and miniatures in general, I decided to cold call a local architectural model firm in my city for a part-time job. I landed the job, which was literally the best thing ever, and I instantly loved it. I was one of only 2 females working there, about 8 guys who I got on with perfectly, and helping out the other girl, let's call her Rachel, painting scale people, making trees, etc. At first, Rachel completely embraces me, insists on girls' lunches, which I effing hate that crap, expresses how nice it is to finally have another girl around, yada yada yada, but I instantly got a bad vibe off her, and I wasn't wrong. After the initial honeymoon period, she proceeds to make my life a complete living hell, yelling at me, throwing out my work while I was at school. I came home crying many a day from the verbal abuse, but I loved the work, loved my other coworkers, and was determined to stick it out, despite unstable Rachel, who, by the way, would come and go, pad her hours, and was despised, yet feared by my fellow coworkers, which I couldn't figure out. Finally, the missing piece clicked. She was sleeping with the owner. So that cleared up why she was allowed to basically make everyone's work life hell, and was paid more than our 3 master model makers. Now, Rachel is about 6 years my senior, 30 to my 24, and obsessed with her looks, especially her hair, which admittedly was very nice. Long, rich brown curls, but she was equally and strangely obsessed with female pattern baldness. Would ask everyone if they saw a bald spot, spent hours on this topic. So when I finally stopped letting her get to me, grew a set, and decided to fight back, I knew I had to be subtle, yet deadly. Find the weakness, as she not only had the owner's ear, she had his D. I purchased a wig similar to her hair, cut off chunks of it, and brought it into work. I slowly started dropping more and more clumps in the back of her chair, around her workspace and floor while she was away, and slowly watched her go from slightly obsessed to full-blown madness. I feel like a horrible person for admitting that it was a joyous experience to watch her squirm. She took off a couple weeks from work to visit some specialists and to recuperate, in her words, but when she came back healed with a full head of hair, I slowly started the campaign again. And she ultimately came to the conclusion that it was the stress of the job causing her hair loss and quit. My coworkers and I hit the bar that night for a long night of celebrations. I sometimes regret my actions, but at the same time, I stayed at that job for another 4 years, and I enjoyed every day of it after she left, as did everyone else. I never told my coworkers what I did, nor would I ever. Still friends with most of them. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.